The crimson sands of Iridia whispered beneath Elena Voss's boots as she made her way through the desolation of the farewell cemetery. 7 years had passed since the Battle of Templar's Fall, yet the memories remained as fresh as the wounds it had left on her soul. The twin suns hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the countless markers that stretched into the distance, each one representing a life sacrificed in service to the Solar Alliance. Captain Elena Voss, her silver-black skin glistening with a thin sheen of sweat in the dying light, moved with purpose between the rows of identical grave markers. Her Arctic clan heritage was evident in the geometric patterns etched into her ceremonial armor patterns that told stories of honor, sacrifice, and rebirth. After years of avoiding this place, she had finally found the courage to face what she had lost. Grave, H2234. No name, just a number. The Alliance's way of honoring the fallen, while simultaneously stripping them of identity in death. But Elena knew who lay beneath the red sand, or rather, who was supposed to lie there. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, her comrade, her confidant, her lover. Elena knelt before the grave marker, her fingers tracing the cold metal digits. The setting suns painted the cemetery in shades of amber and crimson, like blood diffusing through water. The wind picked up, carrying with it the fine red dust that seemed to permeate everything on this forsaken planet. "I'm sorry I didn't save you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, even to herself. The words had been locked inside her for 7 years, festering like an infection. "I should have been there. I should have known what they were planning." A soft exhalation sounded behind her, the faint crunch of a boot on sand. Not the wind. Elena's combat instincts, honed through decades of warfare, sent electricity racing down her spine. She remained perfectly still, every muscle coiled with tension. The cemetery was supposed to be empty at this hour. She had specifically chosen this time to avoid any official ceremonies or other mourners. Slowly, with calculated precision, her hand moved to the plasma pistol, strapped to her thigh. In one fluid motion, she drew the weapon, spun on her heel, and aimed, and found herself staring into a face that had haunted her dreams for 7 long years. Marcus Hale stood 10 paces away, clad in black infiltration armor that seemed to absorb the dying light. His features were leaner than she remembered, weathered by time and hardship. A new scar bisected his left eyebrow, and his once clean-shaven face now bore a close-cropped beard. But his eyes, those distinctive amber eyes, remained unchanged, watching her with an intensity that had once made her feel as though he could see straight through to her soul. Elena's pistol wavered. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "You're dead," she said. Not a question, but a statement of what she had believed to be an immutable fact. "I identified your body." Marcus took a careful step forward, his hands slightly raised to show he meant no harm. "That wasn't me, Elena." His voice was exactly as she remembered it, deep, resonant with the slight accent of the Europa colonies. "That was someone else wearing my face." Elena's training took over as shock threatened to overwhelm her. She steadied her aim, her finger ghosting over the trigger. "Explain," she demanded, "before I put a plasma round through whatever you are." "Operation Phantom Blade," Marcus said quietly. "Deep cover infiltration. The Alliance needed someone inside the Arachon syndicates, someone the enemy believed was dead. After Templar's fall, High Command saw an opportunity." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "They decided I would make the perfect ghost." Elena's mind raced. Operation Phantom Blade was classified at the highest levels. She had heard whispers of it, but nothing concrete. A covert program to place Alliance operatives deep within enemy territory, operatives who were officially listed as killed in action. The perfect cover story, after all. Who would suspect a dead man? 7 years, she said, the words like ash in her mouth. 7 years thinking you died because of my order to pull back from the eastern flank. "I wanted to tell you," Marcus said, taking another step closer. Elena didn't lower her weapon. Believe me, Elena, there wasn't a day I didn't think about reaching out. But contact with anyone from my previous life would have compromised everything. Why now? Elena demanded. Why risk exposure after all this time? Before Marcus could answer, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. Both of them recognized the sound, instantly the charging sequence of an Aerocon pulse rifle. Down! Marcus shouted, diving toward Elena as a blast of blue energy scorched the air where he had been standing. The shot hit the grave marker behind him, melting the metal into a glowing pool of slag. Elena rolled to the side, years of battlefield coordination, with Marcus returning, as if they had never been separated. Her pistol tracked toward the source of the shot, and she fired 3 rapid bursts. The cemetery's perimeter wall erupted in sparks as her shots connected with something or someone concealed in the shadows. They followed me, Marcus grunted, pulling a compact rifle from a holster on his back. I thought I'd lost them in the capital, but they're more persistent than I anticipated. Who? Elena demanded, moving into a crouching position behind a larger memorial stone. Aerocon Death Squad, Marcus replied, his eyes scanning the cemetery's perimeter. Elite unit. They've been hunting me since I extracted with the quantum encryption codes 3 days ago. Another volley of energy blasts peppered their position, forcing them both lower behind the meager cover. Elena knew they couldn't stay where they were. The memorial stones wouldn't withstand concentrated fire for long. The eastern access tunnel, she said, nodding toward a maintenance structure about 50 meters away. It connects to the old supply depot. If we can reach it. Marcus nodded, understanding immediately. Cover pattern Sigma 6. A ghost of a smile touched Elena's lips despite the situation. That he would remember their old tactical shorthand after all this time. On my mark, 3, 2, 1 mark. They moved in perfect synchronization. Elena rolled to the right, firing a continuous stream of covering shots toward the shadowy figures, now visible along the cemetery wall. Marcus sprinted in a low crouch toward the maintenance structure, his rifle barking in precise 3-round bursts. An Aerocon soldier appeared from behind a mausoleum, raising a weapon. Elena's shot caught him square in the chest before he could fire the plasma round, burning through his armor and sending him sprawling backward. More enemies materialized from the lengthening shadows. 6 No-8 figures in the distinctive segmented armor of Aerocon mercenaries. They moved with the coordinated precision of veteran killers attempting to flank Elena and Marcus. Marcus reached the maintenance structure first, slamming his palm against the access panel. The door remained stubbornly shut. Security lockdown, he shouted. They've overridden the civilian systems. Elena fired her remaining shots, forcing 2 advancing Aerocon soldiers into cover. Manual override panel on the left side. Marcus holstered his rifle and pulled a multi-tool from a compartment in his armor. While he worked on the door panel, Elena continued to provide covering fire, but her pistol's energy cell was rapidly depleting. Whatever you're going to do it faster, she called, ducking, as a shot passed close enough to her head that she could feel the heat of it singeing her hair. With a triumphant grunt, Marcus yanked several wires from the panel and crossed them. The maintenance door slid open with a reluctant groan. Got it, move. Elena fired her last shots and sprinted toward the door. An Aerocon energy blast caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around. Pain lanced through her body, but the armor absorbed most of the impact. She stumbled through the doorway as Marcus laid down covering fire. The moment she was inside, Marcus slammed his fist against the internal emergency control. The heavy door slid shut with a resounding clang, sealing them inside the dimly lit maintenance tunnel. That won't hold them for long, he said, examining the wound on Elena's shoulder. Glancing hit. You were lucky. Elena pushed his hand away, her eyes hard. Lucky would have been not finding my dead lover standing over his own grave. Why are you really here, Marcus? What's going on? Marcus's expression darkened. He checked the ammunition counter on his rifle before responding. The quantum encryption codes I mentioned. They're not just any codes, they're the master keys to the Alliance defense network. I discovered that someone high up in Alliance Command has been selling strategic information to the Arachon syndicates. Impossible, Elena replied automatically. All transmissions are monitored. Any unauthorized contact with Arachon territories would be flagged immediately. Not if the person authorizing the monitoring is the same one selling the information, Marcus countered. Elena, we have a traitor at the highest level of command. Someone who's been orchestrating smaller conflicts to position themselves for a major power grab. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with her injury. Who? Marcus met her gaze steadily. Marshal Doran. The name hit Elena like a physical blow. Marshal Doran had been her mentor, the officer who had recognized her potential and shepherded her career. After Marcus's death, Doran had been the one to help her through her grief, to give her new purpose. That's not possible, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, pieces began falling into place. Doran's insistence on personally handling certain sensitive operations, the strange reassignments of officers who asked too many questions, the surprising intelligence failures that always seemed to benefit his strategic position within the Alliance hierarchy. I have proof, Marcus said, pulling a small data drive from a hidden compartment in his armor. Encrypted communications, transfer records, meeting locations. Everything needed to expose him. But I can't get it to Alliance intelligence without going through channels that Doran monitors. The tunnel shuddered as an explosion rocked the door they had come through. The Arachon squad was trying to blast their way in. We need to move, Elena said, pushing aside the turmoil of emotions to focus on immediate survival. The supply depot is 2 kilometers north through these tunnels. There's an emergency communication array there, secure channel military priority. We can transmit the evidence directly to Fleet Admiral Yoshida. Marcus nodded. Lead the way. They moved swiftly through the maintenance tunnel, the red emergency lights casting everything in a bloody glow. Elena's mind raced as she tried to process everything that had happened in the past few minutes. Marcus alive. Doran a traitor. Her entire understanding of the past 7 years suddenly revealed as a carefully constructed lie. When did you discover Doran's involvement? She asked, as they navigated the tunnel network. About 3 months ago, Marcus replied, his voice low. I had infiltrated deep enough into the Arachon hierarchy to gain access to their secure communications. I was expecting to find evidence of their next planned attack. Instead, I found transmission logs between their high command and an Alliance source using Marshal-level encryption protocols. Another explosion echoed through the tunnels behind them, more distant this time, but a reminder that they were still being pursued. Doran recruited me personally for the operation, Marcus continued. He selected the medical team that created my new identity, authorized the falsified death certificate, everything. At the time, I thought it was because of the mission's importance. Now I realize he wanted to control every aspect, to ensure there were no leaks. But why fake your death? Why not just send you in as a recognized operative? Because he needed someone inside the Arachon syndicates who was completely deniable. Someone who couldn't be traced back to him if things went wrong. Marcus's expression hardened. And because I had begun to notice discrepancies in our intelligence about Arachon movements before Templar's fall. I think he worried I might connect the dots. Elena's tactical mind was already examining the implications. So he arranged for you to die, in a battle where I was commanding the retreat. Making me feel responsible would ensure I never looked too closely at the circumstances. Elena, you couldn't have known. I should have. She cut him off, her voice sharp with self-recrimination. All these years I blamed myself while Doran offered me support and kept me close. Close enough to monitor, but not close enough to learn anything damaging. They reached a junction in the tunnel system. Elena paused, orienting herself. Left here, she said, gesturing toward a narrower passage. It connects to the main supply depot access. As they turned the corner, a blinding light suddenly illuminated the tunnel ahead of them. Elena raised her arm to shield her eyes, even as her other hand reached for her depleted pistol. Captain Voss, a familiar voice echoed through the tunnel. What an unexpected surprise. Marshal Doran stepped into view, flanked by 4 Alliance security troopers in full combat gear. His silver-gray hair was immaculately styled, his uniform pristine despite the dusty environment. The metal-laden chest piece gleamed in the harsh light symbols of honor that now seemed like the most bitter irony. "Sir," Elena responded automatically, the ingrained military discipline of years asserting itself before she could stop it. Doran's eyes shifted to Marcus, and a flicker of genuine surprise crossed his features before being masked by professional composure. "Lieutenant Hale," he said as calmly, as if addressing an officer who had merely been late for a briefing, rather than one who had been presumed dead for 7 years. "I see Operation Phantom Blade has experienced some protocol breaches." Marcus raised his rifle, aiming directly at Doran's chest. "The only breach of protocol is selling Alliance encryption codes to the enemy marshal." Doran sighed as if disappointed by a child's poor performance. "Lower your weapon, Lieutenant. You're clearly suffering from prolonged stress and possible identity confusion side effects we were warned might occur with deep cover operatives. The Arachon death squad following us isn't confusion," Elena said, stepping slightly to the side to improve her firing position if it became necessary. "They're here because they know Marcus has evidence of your treason." Doran's expression hardened. "Captain Voss, I understand this must be disorienting for you discovering that Lieutenant Hale is alive after all this time. But I assure you he is not thinking clearly. The psychological strain of his mission has compromised his judgment." "The evidence is clear," Marcus insisted. "I have the transmission logs, the meeting coordinates, the account transfers, all leading back to you." "What you have," Doran replied coldly, "is fabricated Arachon propaganda designed to sow discord within Alliance command. I'm disappointed that a veteran operative of your caliber would fall for such an obvious ploy." Elena could see the security troopers shifting into better firing positions, their weapons not quite aimed at her and Marcus, but ready to be brought to bear in an instant. The situation was balanced on a knife's edge. "If what Marcus has is false," she said carefully, "then you won't mind if we transmit it to Alliance intelligence for verification. We can resolve this misunderstanding officially." Doran's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. However, given the sensitive nature of Operation Phantom Blade and Lieutenant Hale's compromised psychological state protocol, demands we secure the evidence and both of you before proceeding, for your own safety and for Alliance security." It was the confirmation Elena needed. If Doran were innocent, he would have no reason to prevent them from contacting intelligence directly. His insistence on securing them first revealed his true intentions. "The Arachon squad will be through the tunnel defenses soon," she said, changing tactics. "We should move to a more defensible position before they reach us." Doran nodded to the security troopers. "Escort Captain Voss and Lieutenant Hale to my shuttle. We'll deal with the Arachon intruders once they're secured." As 2 of the troopers moved forward, Marcus tensed beside her. Elena caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod, their old signal for synchronized action. "Now!" she shouted, dropping to one knee as Marcus threw a compact flashbang grenade from his belt. The device detonated with a blinding flash and deafening concussion that reverberated through the confined space of the tunnel. Elena and Marcus were prepared for it. Doran and his security team were not. In the moment of disorientation that followed, Elena lunged forward, tackling the nearest trooper. Marcus fired 2 precise shots, disabling the weapons of the other security personnel without harming them. Doran, recovering more quickly than his subordinates, drew his sidearm. The shot went wide as Elena rolled to the side, coming up with the stunned trooper's rifle in her hands. "Stand down, Marshal," she commanded, bringing the weapon to bear. Instead of complying, Doran fired again, the energy blast scorching the wall beside Marcus's head. Marcus returned fire, his shot catching Doran in the arm. The Marshal grunted in pain, but didn't drop his weapon. "You're making a serious mistake," Doran warned, his voice tight with anger and pain. "Even if you escape here, where will you go? I control all Alliance communications in this sector. One word from me, and you'll both be hunted as traitors. We don't need to escape the sector, Elena replied. Just reach the supply depot's communication array. Admiral Yoshida will receive the evidence directly, bypassing your control. Doran's expression shifted from confident to calculating. You think Yoshida is clean? The Alliance power structure is more compromised than you realize, Captain. There are larger forces at work here, forces that will reshape the political landscape of the entire system. You could be part of that future, rather than a casualty of it. By betraying everything the Alliance stands for, Marcus asked incredulously. By selling out our defense systems to criminals and murderers. By recognizing the inevitable, Doran snapped. The Alliance is ossified, paralyzed by bureaucracy and outdated ideals. The Arakan syndicates have the resources and ruthlessness to implement necessary changes. All they needed was guidance, my guidance, to become a legitimate political force, rather than mere criminals. The distant sound of another explosion interrupted the confrontation. The Arakan death squad was getting closer. Your Arakan allies seem less interested in political legitimacy and more focused on killing us all, Elena observed dryly. Doran's smile was cold. They're coming for the encryption codes, not for me. Once they recover those, my usefulness to them remains intact. Yours, I'm afraid, does not. With surprising quickness for a man of his age and rank, Doran lunged to the side and slammed his palm against a control panel on the tunnel wall. Emergency bulkheads began to descend from the ceiling at several points along the tunnel. Enjoy your reunion while it lasts, he called, backing away as a bulkhead began to separate him from Elena and Marcus. The Arakan squad will be with you shortly. Marcus fired at the retreating figure, but his shot was deflected by the descending bulkhead. Within seconds, they were sealed off from Doran and his security team, but also potentially trapped in a section of tunnel, with Arakan killers closing in from the other direction. Options, Marcus asked tersely, checking the charge on his rifle. Elena was already examining the sealed bulkhead. These emergency systems operate on a separate power grid from the main tunnel controls. If we can access a maintenance panel, we might be able to override the lockdown. She moved to a recessed panel near the floor and pried off the cover, revealing a tangle of wires and circuit boards. After a moment of examination, she shook her head. The override has been physically disabled. Doran must have planned for this contingency. Marcus joined her, kneeling to examine the circuitry. What about that? He asked, pointing to a small access hatch in the ceiling near the bulkhead. Elena followed his gaze. Maintenance crawl space. It might bypass the bulkhead, but it'll be tight. Better than waiting for the Arakan squad, Marcus replied, already moving to position himself beneath the hatch. He interlaced his fingers to create a step for Elena. Ladies first. Despite everything, Elena felt a fleeting smile cross her lips. She placed her boot in his hands and allowed him to boost her up to the hatch. It took considerable strength to twist the manual release lever, but after a moment of straining, the hatch popped open with a hiss of escaping air. Elena pulled herself up into the cramped space above the tunnel. As Marcus had predicted, it was extremely tight, barely half a meter in height, forcing her to crawl on her stomach. She reached down to help Marcus up after her. Cozy, he remarked as he squeezed into the space beside her. Just like that survival training exercise on Europa, she replied, beginning to crawl forward. Though with considerably less ice water. The maintenance crawl space was pitch black, beyond the light, filtering through the open hatch. Elena activated the illumination panel on her armor's forearm, casting a narrow beam of light ahead of them. The space continued above the bulkhead, just as she had hoped. They moved as quickly as the confined space would allow the sound of their breathing and the scrape of armor against metal, the only noise. After what felt like an eternity of claustrophobic crawling, Elena spotted another access hatch in the floor of the crawl space. This should put us past the bulkhead, she whispered, though there was little chance of being overheard. The habit of operational security was too deeply ingrained to break. She carefully unscrewed the hatch and peered down into the tunnel below. It was empty, illuminated by the same red emergency lighting. With practiced care, she lowered herself down, then helped Marcus descend. "The supply depot should be about 500 meters ahead," she said, orienting herself. "We need to—" Her words were cut short by the unmistakable sound of an Aerocon pulse rifle charging somewhere in the darkness ahead of them. "Back!" Marcus shouted, shoving Elena toward a side passage as energy blasts erupted from the shadows. They dove into the narrow corridor, just as the area they had been standing was engulfed in searing blue energy. "Doran must have told them about the supply depot," Elena said, breathing hard. "They're already ahead of us." Marcus checked his rifle's charge. "We can't go back and we can't go forward. Ideas?" Elena's mind raced through possible escape routes. The supply depot had been their best option for contacting Admiral Yoshida, but with Aerocon forces blocking the way, they needed an alternative. "Iridia Outpost," she said finally. "The old defensive position from the initial colonization. It's abandoned now, but some of the military infrastructure might still be functional. Including communications? Possibly. It was a forward command post during the early conflicts with the Aerocon. If any of the equipment is still operational, it would have the necessary encryption to reach Alliance Command directly." Marcus considered this. "How far?" 2 kilometers southeast through the old mining tunnels that connect to this maintenance system. We'd emerge in the Badlands, then have to cross about half a kilometer of open terrain to reach the outpost. It wasn't an ideal plan, but with Aerocon forces ahead, and Doran's security team presumably in pursuit behind them, options were limited. "Lead the way," Marcus said. "I've got your back." They moved cautiously through the side passage, which gradually narrowed and descended. The industrial metal walls gave way to rough-hewn stone, the beginning of the mining tunnels Elena had mentioned. The air grew cooler and carried the faint tang of mineral deposits. These mines were abandoned when the more profitable veins were discovered in the northern continent, Elena explained, as they navigated the increasingly rough terrain. The Alliance repurposed them as emergency evacuation routes during the early skirmishes with the Aerocon. "And now they're our best hope for exposing a traitor at the heart of Alliance Command," Marcus added grimly. "Not exactly what the engineers had in mind, I'd wager." They fell silent as they continued through the tunnels, conserving their energy for the journey ahead. The only sounds were their footsteps on the stone floor and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling, a precious commodity on the desert planet. After nearly an hour of careful progress, they reached a junction where the mining tunnel opened into a larger cavern. Ancient mining equipment lay abandoned, partially buried under decades of dust and fallen rock. "We should be directly beneath the eastern Badlands now," Elena said, examining a faded map etched into a metal plate on the wall. "There's an access shaft that leads to the surface about 200 meters that way." She pointed toward a dark opening on the far side of the cavern. As they started across the open space, Marcus suddenly froze, raising his hand in a silent signal to stop. Elena instantly complied, her senses heightening, as she tried to detect what had alarmed him. At first, she heard nothing beyond the ambient sounds of the cavern. Then faintly, there came the distinctive sound of armored boots on stone, multiple sets moving with the practiced synchronization of trained soldiers. They weren't alone in the mining tunnels. Without a word, Marcus pointed to a massive piece of mining equipment that offered concealment. They moved swiftly to take cover behind it, just as the first Aerocon soldier emerged from a tunnel entrance to their right. The soldier was followed by 3 more, each clad in the distinctive segmented armor of Aerocon Special Forces. They moved with weapons raised, scanning the cavern methodically. "They're between us and the access shaft," Elena whispered, her lips close to Marcus's ear. "They must have entered the mining system from another point." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. 4 of them, 2 of us. Not great odds, especially in an open area with limited cover." Elena surveyed the cavern, her tactical mind assessing and discarding potential strategies. Her gaze settled on a control panel attached to the mining equipment they were hiding behind. "This is an old plasma drill," she murmured. "If it still has power." She cautiously reached for the control panel, brushing away decades of dust to reveal the interface beneath. To her surprise, a faint power indicator light still glowed. The equipment's power cell had been designed to last for decades in standby mode. "If I can reroute the power to the primary ignition circuit instead of the drilling mechanism," she explained quietly, "it should create a massive energy discharge." Marcus finished catching on to her plan. "A makeshift flashbang on a much larger scale." "Exactly. But we'll need to shield our eyes and be ready to move the instant it goes off." While Elena worked on the control panel, Marcus kept watch on the Arachon soldiers, who were methodically searching the cavern, moving ever closer to their position. "Almost there," Elena breathed, connecting the final circuit. "On my signal, close your eyes and then run for the access shaft. 3, 2. Before she could finish the countdown, one of the Arachon soldiers rounded the corner of the mining equipment. There was a moment of startled recognition on both sides before training took over. The soldier raised his weapon, but Marcus was faster. His rifle barked twice the shots, catching the Arachon in the chest and throat. The soldier collapsed, but not before a strangled cry of alarm escaped him. The other Arachon troops immediately responded energy blasts, peppering the mining equipment as they moved to flank the position. "Now!" Elena shouted, slapping the activation control on the panel before diving away. The ancient plasma drill surged to life with a deafening roar, its power cells dumping their entire reserve into the ignition circuit. A blinding flash of blue-white energy erupted from the machine, followed by a thunderous explosion that shook the entire cavern. Elena had closed her eyes at the last second, but even through her eyelids the flash was painfully bright. She rolled to her feet, blinking away after images as she sprinted toward the access shaft. Marcus was right beside her, his rifle firing blindly behind them to discourage pursuit. The Arachon soldiers, caught in the open by the energy discharge, were staggering blindly, their sensors and vision temporarily overwhelmed. One of them fired wildly in Elena and Marcus's direction, but the shots went wide, impacting the cavern wall in a shower of pulverized stone. They reached the access shaft, a narrow vertical tunnel, with metal rungs embedded in the wall, leading up to what appeared to be a hatch in the ceiling. Elena grabbed the lowest rung and began to climb with Marcus close behind. "They're recovering," he called up to her, glancing back at the disoriented but rapidly regrouping Arachon soldiers. Elena climbed faster, her muscles burning with the exertion. The shaft seemed to stretch endlessly upward each rung, bringing them closer to the surface, but not quickly enough to outpace their pursuers. The first energy blast struck the wall beside her, showering her with fragments of hot stone. The Arachon soldiers had reached the bottom of the shaft and were firing up at them. "Keep climbing!" Marcus shouted, stopping on a rung and turning to return fire. His position was precarious, clinging to the ladder with one hand while firing his rifle with the other, but his shots were deadly accurate. An Arachon soldier cried out and fell back from the shaft entrance. Elena reached the top of the shaft where a heavy metal hatch blocked the way to the surface. She braced herself on the ladder and pushed against it with all her strength. For a terrifying moment, it refused to budge, sealed by years of disuse and the accumulated sand of Iridia's frequent storms. Below her, Marcus was engaged in a desperate exchange of fire with the remaining Arachon soldiers. His rifle's energy cell was nearly depleted, each shot more valuable than the last. With a final surge of desperate strength, Elena slammed her shoulder against the hatch. It gave way with a screech of protesting metal, swinging open to reveal the night sky of Iridia. She pulled herself out onto the surface and immediately turned to help Marcus. He was halfway up the shaft, climbing one-handed, while continuing to fire at the pursuers below. As Elena watched, his rifle emitted the distinctive whine of a depleted energy cell. His weapon was now useless. "Marcus," she called, reaching down toward him. He looked up, sheathed the empty rifle, and climbed the remaining distance with renewed urgency. An Arachon energy blast sizzled past his head close enough to singe his hair. Another shot struck his leg, causing him to cry out in pain, but he maintained his grip on the ladder. Elena seized his outstretched hand, and with strength born of desperation, hauled him up through the hatch. The moment he was clear, she slammed it shut and engage the emergency lock, a simple but effective mechanical system that would take time to bypass. They found themselves in the middle of Iridia's eastern Badlands, a vast expanse of red sand dunes and jagged stone formations, illuminated by the ghostly light of the planet's 3 moons. The air was cold, the temperature dropping rapidly, as it always did after sunset on the desert world. In the distance, perhaps half a kilometer away, the silhouette of Iridia Outpost was visible against the starlit sky, a jumble of low structures and defensive walls, long abandoned, but still standing against the harsh environment. "Can you walk?" Elena asked, examining the wound on Marcus's leg. The Arachon energy blast had burned through his armor, leaving a nasty wound that was already beginning to blister and swell. Marcus grimaced but nodded. "I'll manage. We need to reach that outpost before they get through the hatch." Elena tore a strip of fabric from her undertunic and bound the wound as best she could. Then, supporting some of Marcus's weight, she began the arduous journey across the open Badlands toward their destination. The going was slow and painful. The sand shifted treacherously beneath their feet, and Marcus's injury forced them to stop several times to rest. Each time they paused, Elena anxiously checked behind them for signs of pursuit, expecting at any moment to see the Arachon soldiers emerging from the access shaft. "We're almost there," she encouraged, as they approached the perimeter of the abandoned outpost. "Just a little further." The outpost loomed before them, its walls weathered by decades of sandstorms, but still formidable. The main entrance was partly buried by drifting sand, but a breach in the perimeter wall offered an alternative way in. They squeezed through the gap and found themselves in what had once been the outpost's central courtyard. Long abandoned vehicles and equipment lay scattered about, half buried in sand. The outpost buildings surrounded the courtyard barracks, supply depots, and most importantly, the command center. "There," Elena said, pointing to a low, bunker-like structure with a communications array still visible on its roof. "That's our best chance for a working transmitter." They had just started toward the command center when a blinding spotlight suddenly illuminated them from above. The roar of engines shattered the desert night as a military transport descended from the sky, hovering directly over the courtyard. "Alliance security." A voice boomed through an amplification system. "Stand down and surrender immediately." Elena squinted against the light, trying to make out details of the transport. It bore Alliance markings, but that meant little. If Doran had declared them rogue operatives, Alliance forces would be hunting them alongside the Arachon. "We need to reach that command center," she said to Marcus, her voice low but urgent. "It's our only chance to transmit the evidence before Doran can silence us." Marcus nodded grimly. "I'll draw their attention. You get to the transmitter." "No," Elena protested, gripping his arm. "We stay together." "The evidence is what matters," Marcus insisted. "If both of us are captured or killed, the truth dies with us." He pressed the data drive into her hand, closing her fingers around it. "Make sure it reaches Yoshida." Before she could argue further, Marcus pulled away from her support and hobbled into the open, waving his arms. "Marshal Doran," he shouted up at the transport. "I know you're up there. I'm the one you want. I have the encryption codes." The spotlight swiveled to focus on him, momentarily leaving Elena in shadow. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, torn between the mission and the man she had only just rediscovered. Then, her training and duty asserted themselves. Staying low, she moved swiftly toward the command center, while Marcus continued to draw attention to himself. The command center's door was sealed, but yielded to Elena's combat knife, which she wedged into the gap and leveraged open. Inside, emergency lighting still functioned, casting a dim red glow over abandoned control stations and communication equipment. Elena moved immediately to the central console, brushing away years of accumulated dust to reveal the interface beneath. To her immense relief, the system responded to her touch power reserves, bringing ancient screens flickering to life. Outside, she could hear shouting Marcus continuing his distraction and the authoritative commands of Alliance security forces, ordering him to surrender. The sound of boots on sand told her they had deployed ground troops from the transport. Her fingers flew over the console, bypassing security protocols with her captain's override codes and accessing the communication system. It was an older model, but the principles remained the same. She quickly configured it to transmit directly to Alliance Fleet headquarters on a secure emergency channel, one that, if operational, would bypass the standard communication network that Doran controlled. The system whirred to life, connection protocols initializing. A progress bar crawled across the screen, agonizingly slow. Outside, the shouting had stopped, replaced by the unmistakable sound of weapons fire. Elena inserted the data drive into a port on the console. The ancient system took several seconds to recognize the device, then began copying its contents into the transmission buffer. The door behind her burst open. Elena spun, drawing her knife, the only weapon she had left, only to find herself facing Marshal Doran himself. He stood in the doorway, plasma pistol aimed directly at her heart. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, and his immaculate uniform was now torn and dust-covered. "Step away from the console, Captain," he ordered, his voice cold with fury. "Now!" Elena glanced at the transmission status, 85% complete. Just a few more seconds, and the evidence would be on its way to Fleet Admiral Yoshida, beyond Doran's ability to intercept. "Where's Marcus?" she asked, stalling for time. A smile that held no warmth crossed Doran's face. "Lieutenant Hale is currently experiencing the consequences of his poor choices. As you will, if you don't comply immediately." "Why, Marshal?" Elena asked, her hand inching toward the console behind her back. "You were respected, honored. Why betray everything you spent a lifetime building?" "Respect, honor." Doran spat the words like they were poison. Empty concepts invented to keep soldiers obedient, while politicians and bureaucrats squander their sacrifices. "I spent 40 years watching the Alliance decay, from within, paralyzed by procedure and compromise." "So you decided to sell us out to criminals?" "I decided to force change," Doran corrected her. "The Arachon syndicates represent what the Alliance used to be decisive, efficient, unhampered by the endless debate that has crippled our ability to act. With the right guidance, my guidance, they could become the force that the Alliance was meant to be." "At the cost of how many Alliance lives?" Elena demanded, genuine outrage overcoming her caution. "How many soldiers like Marcus have died because of information you sold to the enemy?" A flicker of something, perhaps regret, perhaps merely annoyance, crossed Doran's features. "Sacrifices are always necessary in war, Captain. You know that better than most." Elena's fingers found the transmission activation control behind her back. "And what about your sacrifice, Marshal? Are you prepared to lose everything you've built, your reputation, your legacy?" "History is written by the victors," Doran replied with cold confidence. "And I intend to be among them." He took a step forward, his pistol unwavering. "Now, step away from the console. Final warning." Elena met his gaze steadily. Too late. She pressed the activation control. The console emitted a series of confirming tones as the transmission began sending the evidence of Doran's treason directly to Alliance Fleet headquarters. Rage contorted Doran's features. His finger tightened on the trigger of his pistol, and then he staggered backward as a plasma bolt struck him in the shoulder from behind. Marcus stood in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame, his borrowed Alliance security pistol still raised. Blood soaked his left side, but his aim remained steady. "You should have verified I was actually down, Marshal," he said, his voice strained but determined. "Basic field protocol." Doran recovered quickly, despite his wound. With surprising agility, he lunged sideways behind a control station, returning fire with his pistol. The shot missed Marcus by centimeters, scorching the doorframe where his head had been a moment before. Elena seized the opportunity to close the distance, vaulting over a console toward Doran's position. The Marshal swung his weapon toward her, but she was already within arm's reach. She struck his wrist with the edge of her hand, sending the pistol flying from his grasp. Doran was no desk officer, however. Despite his age and injuries, he responded with the trained reflexes of a veteran combat officer. His fist connected with Elena's jaw, knocking her backward. He followed up with a swift kick that caught her in the ribs, driving the breath from her lungs. Marcus fired again, but Doran had already moved, using the command center's equipment as cover. The shot impacted harmlessly against a metal cabinet. Elena rolled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ribs. She circled to the right, while Marcus provided covering fire from the doorway, forcing Doran to remain in a defensive position. "It's over, Marshal," she called. "The evidence is already transmitting to Fleet Headquarters. In minutes, Admiral Yoshida will have everything he needs to expose you." "You think transmission from this outdated relic will reach anywhere?" Doran laughed bitterly. "The communication array on the roof has been damaged for decades. Your precious evidence is going nowhere." Elena felt a chill of doubt. Was he right? Had their desperate plan failed at the final hurdle? Her momentary hesitation was all Doran needed. He burst from cover, tackling her with the full force of his weight. They crashed to the floor, grappling for control. Doran was stronger than his age, suggested, his hands closing around Elena's throat with crushing force. "I mentored you." He snarled, his face inches from hers, twisted with rage and betrayal. "I made your career, and this is how you repay me." Black spots danced at the edges of Elena's vision as she fought for breath. Her fingers clawed at Doran's hands, trying to break his grip, but the lack of oxygen was rapidly sapping her strength. A shadow fell across them. Marcus, despite his injuries, had crossed the room. In his hand was a heavy piece of equipment torn from one of the consoles. With the last of his strength, he brought it down on Doran's head. The impact wasn't enough to knock Doran unconscious, but it stunned him sufficiently for his grip to loosen. Elena gasped for air, then drove her knee upward into Doran's midsection. The Marshal grunted in pain and rolled away. Before he could recover, Elena was on her feet. She delivered a precise kick to Doran's head, not hard enough to kill, but sufficient to render him unconscious. The Marshal slumped to the floor, still breathing, but no longer a threat. Marcus collapsed against a console, his strength finally giving out. Elena rushed to his side, helping him into a sitting position. "The transmission?" he asked weakly. Elena returned to the main console, checking the system status. Doran was lying. "The communication system is functional, damaged, operating at reduced capacity, but functional. The transmission went through." Relief washed over Marcus's features. "So it's done. Yoshida will act on the evidence." "It's done," Elena confirmed, retrieving Doran's pistol and checking that the Marshal remained unconscious. "But we're not out of danger yet. There are still Alliance security forces outside, and possibly the Arachon squad as well." As if to confirm her words, an explosion rocked the outpost, causing dust and debris to rain down from the ceiling. The distinctive sound of Arachon energy weapons echoed from the courtyard. "Sounds like our pursuers are fighting each other now," Marcus observed grimly. "Alliance security versus Arachon. Small favors." Elena quickly assessed their situation. This command center was designed as a defensive position. The walls are reinforced, and there's an emergency shelter one level down, designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Given the choice between Alliance security, who think we're traitors, and Arachon, who want to kill us for the codes, I vote for the shelter, Marcus said, attempting a weak smile despite his injuries. Elena nodded, slinging his arm over her shoulder to support him. "The access is this way. Can you make it?" "With you always." They made their way to a heavy metal hatch in the floor of the command center. Elena operated the manual release, revealing a steep stairway descending into darkness. Supporting Marcus's weight, she helped him navigate the stairs, carefully closing and sealing the hatch behind them. The emergency shelter was a Spartan space designed for utility rather than comfort. Basic lighting activated automatically as they entered, revealing supply crates, medical equipment, and communication backup systems. Elena helped Marcus to a cot in the corner, then retrieved a medical kit from a wall-mounted cabinet. The supplies were old, but still sealed and sterile. "Let me see that leg," she said, cutting away the makeshift bandage she had applied earlier. The wound was ugly, burned flesh, surrounding a deep penetration where the energy blast had impacted. It wasn't immediately life-threatening, but without proper medical attention, infection would become a serious concern. Elena cleaned the wound as best she could with the available supplies, applied a regenerative gel from the medical kit, and bound it with fresh bandages. Marcus endured the painful process in stoic silence, only the occasional tightening around his eyes betraying his discomfort. "What about your other injuries?" she asked, noting the bloodstains on his side where he had been hit during the confrontation with Alliance security. "Glancing hit," he assured her. "Looks worse than it is. The armor took most of it." Elena wasn't entirely convinced, but didn't press the issue. She applied medicated patches to the visible wounds and helped him into a more comfortable position on the cot. Above them, the sounds of battle continued, muffled by the thick shelter walls, but still audible. Alliance security forces and the Arachon squad, both pursuing them for different reasons, now locked in combat with each other. "How long do you think before Admiral Yoshida responds to the transmission?" Marcus asked, as Elena checked the shelter's communication system. "Hard to say. The transmission would reach fleet headquarters almost instantly, but action," she shrugged. "Bureaucracy moves slowly, even in cases of high treason. Hours, maybe a day. And in the meantime, we're trapped here." "There are worse places to be trapped," Elena pointed out. "This shelter has supplies for weeks, the best defenses available with 20-year-old technology, and we're together." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Together. After 7 years of believing Marcus dead, of blaming herself for his loss, he was here with her, alive and breathing. "I never stopped thinking about you," Marcus said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Even deep undercover, surrounded by enemies, your face was what I saw when I closed my eyes at night." Elena sat on the edge of the cot beside him. "I mourned you. Visited your grave on the anniversary of Templar's fall every year." "I know. I was there once 2 years ago, watching from a distance. I couldn't approach you, couldn't risk compromising the operation, but I needed to see you. Why this year? Why reveal yourself now after all this time?" Marcus grimaced as he shifted position. "The Arachon were starting to suspect me. I'd been gathering evidence of Doran's collaboration for months, waiting for the right moment to extract. Then, I intercepted communications about a major offensive they were planning, using Alliance encryption codes to bypass our defensive systems. I couldn't wait any longer." Elena nodded, understanding. "You chose the mission over personal considerations, as any good soldier would." "As you would have done," Marcus corrected her. "That's why Doran's betrayal cut so deep. He used our dedication against us, my willingness to sacrifice everything for the mission, your commitment to the chain of command. He weaponized our best qualities." The shelter trembled slightly as another explosion rocked the outpost above them. The battle was intensifying. "Do you think we made a difference?" Elena asked, her voice soft in the dim light of the shelter. "Or are we just two soldiers caught in a game played by powers beyond our control?" Marcus reached out, taking her hand in his. His skin was warm, calloused, real, in a way that still seemed miraculous to her, after believing him dead for so long. "We made a difference," he said with quiet conviction. "The evidence is transmitted. Doran is exposed. Whatever happens to us, the truth is out there now. The Alliance will survive this betrayal and be stronger for having faced it." Elena wanted to believe him. After years of carrying the weight of perceived failure, of believing she had lost not only a lover, but a comrade due to her tactical decisions, the possibility of redemption, of having actually made a positive difference, was almost too much to hope for. The communication system on the shelter wall suddenly crackled to life, startling them both. "Attention, Iridia Outpost." A voice emerged through static. "This is Vice Admiral Chen of the Alliance Fleet. Captain Voss, Lieutenant Hale. If you can hear this transmission, respond immediately." Elena exchanged a glance with Marcus, then moved quickly to the communication panel. This is Captain Elena Voss. Lieutenant Hale is with me. We are secure in the emergency shelter beneath the command center. Captain, your transmission was received by Fleet Headquarters. Admiral Yoshida has ordered immediate action. Alliance forces are deploying to your location to extract you and secure Marshal Doran. Relief washed over Elena so profound it made her knees weak. What's the status of the hostile forces at our location? Alliance security forces under Doran's command have been ordered to stand down. Most are complying. The Arachon squad is being engaged and neutralized. Expect extraction within 1 hour. We'll be here, Admiral, Elena responded, unable to keep a slight tremor from her voice. Thank you. The transmission ended, leaving them in silence once more. But it was a different quality of silence now filled with hope, rather than desperate uncertainty. It worked, Marcus said, a note of wonder in his voice. We actually did it. Elena returned to his side, taking his hand again. We did. They sat together in the shelter listening, as the sounds of battle above gradually diminished, then ceased altogether. Neither felt the need to fill the silence with words. After 7 years of separation, of believing that death had parted them forever, simply existing in the same space was enough. Eventually, Elena spoke. When this is over, when we've given our testimony and the dust settles, what then? Marcus considered the question. I don't know. I've been dead for 7 years. My old life doesn't exist anymore. Everything will have to be rebuilt. Not everything, Elena said softly. Some things just need to be rediscovered. He met her gaze, understanding in his eyes. Are you offering to help with that rediscovery, Captain Voss? I think I owe you that much, Lieutenant Hale. After all, I did spend 7 years feeling guilty about your death. Seems only fair I spend at least that long making up for lost time. A smile. The first genuine smile she had seen from him since his miraculous reappearance transformed Marcus's face. I believe I can agree to those terms. The communication system crackled again. Captain Voss, Lieutenant Hale. Extraction team has secured the outpost. You are clear to emerge from the shelter. Medical personnel are standing by. Acknowledged, Elena responded. We're on our way up. She helped Marcus to his feet, supporting his weight as they made their way back to the stairs. Before they ascended, he paused, turning to face her. Elena, he said, his voice low and intense. Whatever happens next, whatever complications we face, I want you to know that finding you again, seeing you kneel at that grave, and hearing your voice after all these years, it made everything worth it. Elena felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. There would be time for that later. Now was the time for strength, for moving forward. Let's go face the future, she said, together. They climbed the stairs, slowly emerging into the command center, where Alliance medical personnel immediately surrounded them, particularly the injured Marcus. Doran was nowhere to be seen, already secured and transported presumably. Through the windows, Elena could see the courtyard of the outpost now filled with Alliance troops and vehicles. The red sands of Iridia were stained with the evidence of the recent battle, but the rising sun was beginning to crest the horizon, bathing everything in golden light. Days later, after debriefings and medical treatments, Elena returned to the farewell cemetery alone. The grave marker, H2234, still stood, though the area around it showed signs of the confrontation that had taken place there, scorched sand from energy weapons, boot prints not yet erased by the wind. Elena knelt before the marker once more, but this time she placed a warrior's scepter, the traditional Arctic clan symbol of honor and respect, against the cold metal. I'm sorry I didn't save you, she whispered, echoing the words she had spoken days before. But today I saved him and myself. She remained there for a moment longer, feeling the desert wind against her face, watching as it slowly began to erase the signs of struggle from the sand. Then she rose and turned away from the grave. Marcus stood waiting at the cemetery entrance, leaning on a cane but standing under his own power. His wounds were healing, as were hers, both the physical injuries and the deeper wounds that 7 years of separation and guilt had inflicted. Elena walked toward him, leaving the empty grave behind. Together, they turned their faces toward the twin suns of Iridia as they climbed higher in the sky, illuminating the path ahead. "Ready?" Marcus asked. Elena nodded, taking his hand. "Ready?" They walked away from the cemetery, away from the past, and toward whatever future awaited them, no longer separated by death, real or imagined, but united by the truth they had fought to reveal, and the bond that had survived against all odds. Behind them, the wind continued its patient work, smoothing away footprints and erasing all evidence of their presence, as it had done for countless others before them. But some marks could not be erased. The impact of choices made truths revealed, and love reclaimed from the very grasp of death itself.